That's good.
The roll call shows 68 present, 2 absent and excused, a quorum being present. The House is ready for business. The second order of business is prayer by the chaplain, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Today, the prayer will be led by Pastor Tom Doherty, and House Page Christina Nelson will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Will the guests in the gallery please rise?
Paul's letter to the Romans, chapter 12, verses 9 and 10. Love must be sincere. Hate what is evil. Cling to what is good. Be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, give us a sincere love for mankind and to do what it takes to be people who encourage and help one another. I pray, O Lord, that you would remove any grains of selfishness that we may have. Give us the power from within to hate what is evil and to always do what is right in your sight. I pray for great devotion and unity in this place. Help us to listen carefully to others and give great discernment when tackling the issues of the day. Thank you for this house family and for all the hard work they do. Bless them and their families as they serve this great state. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The House will now advance to the third order of business, approval of the journal. The House is at the third order.
February 19th, 2013. Mr. Speaker, will your Committee on Judiciary, Rules and Administration report that we have read and approved the House Journal of the 43rd Legislative Day and recommend same be adopted as corrected. Moved by Wills, seconded by Burgoyne.
You all heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The motion carries and the report is adopted. The House will now, the gentleman from District 6.
Mr. Speaker, for personal privilege.
The gentleman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to welcome to the House the students, bachelor's and master's social work students from LCSC and their faculty sponsor, Dr. Brian Christensen. Welcome to the House.
The House is at the fourth order.
From the Office of the Governor, a certificate of appointment. Know all men that pursuant to the provisions section 59-917 Idaho Code, Joanne Wood, State Representative, District 35, Seat A, Jefferson County, State of Idaho, has nominated Ken Hall of Terrellton, Idaho, to perform the duties of this office temporarily as acting State Representative, District 35, Seat A. Now, therefore, I, C.L. Butch Otter, Governor of the State of Idaho, by virtue of the authority vested in me, do hereby appoint Ken Hall of Terrellton, Idaho, to the office of Acting State Representative, District 35, Seat A, for a term commencing February 19, 2013, and continuing until February 22, 2013. In testimony whereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused to be affixed the great seal of the State of Idaho at the Capitol in Boise on this 18th day of February in the year of our Lord 2013 and of the independence of the United States of America, the 237th year, by the Governor, C.L. Butch Otter, and Secretary of State, Ben Usursa.
The certificate of appointment for Representative Ken Hall will be filed in the office of the Chief Clerk, and the oath of office was previously administered.
February 18th, 2013. Mr. Speaker, I return herewith enrolled House Bill 14, 15, 22, 23, and 37, which have been signed by the President Novak, Secretary of the Senate.
House Bills 14, 15, 22, 23, as well as House Bill 37 will be referred to Judiciary, Rules and Administration for delivery to the Governor.
February 18th, 2013. Mr. Speaker, I return herewith House Concurrent Resolution 2, which has passed the Senate. Novak, Secretary of the Senate.
House Concurrent Resolution 2 will be referred to Judiciary, Rules and Administration for enrolling. The House will now advance to the fifth order of business, report of standing committees. The House is at the fifth order.
February 19th, 2013. Mr. Speaker, will your Committee on Judiciary, Rules and Administration report that we have enrolled House Bills 21, 25, 87, 39, 85, 32, 33, and House Bill 35. Wills, Chairman.
House Bills 21, 25, 87, 39, 85, 32, 33, and House Bill 35 will be signed by the Speaker and sent to the Senate for the signature of the Senate President.
February 19th, 2013. Mr. Speaker, will your Committee on Judiciary Rules and Administration report that we have engrossed House Bill 12 as amended in the Senate. Wills, Chairman.
House Bill 12, as amended in the Senate, will be filed for first reading.
February 18th, 2013. Mr. Speaker, will your Committee on Revenue and Taxation report that we have had under consideration House Bill 140 and 141 and recommend that they do pass. Collins, Chairman.
House Bill 140 and 141 will be filed for second reading.
February 18th, 2013. Mr. Speaker, will your Committee on Education report that we have had under consideration House Bill 163, 177, and Senate Bill 1027 and recommend that they do pass. DeMordaunt, Chairman.
House Bill 163, 177, as well as Senate Bill 1027 will be filed for second reading.
February 18th, 2013. Mr. Speaker, will your Committee on Health and Welfare report that we have had under consideration House Bill 109 and Senate Bill 1010 and recommend that they do pass. Wood, Chairman.
House Bill 109 and Senate Bill 1010 will be filed for second reading.
February 18th, 2013. Mr. Speaker, will your Committee on State Affairs report that we have had under consideration House Bill 107 and 161 and recommend that they do pass. Lurcher, Chairman.
House Bill 107 and 161 will be filed for second reading.
February 18th, 2013. Mr. Speaker, will your Committee on Transportation and Defense report that we have had under consideration House Bill 167, 169, and House Concurrent Resolution 7 and recommend that they do pass. Palmer, Chairman.
House Bill 167 and 169, as well as House Concurrent Resolution number 7, will be filed for second reading.
February 18th, 2013. Mr. Speaker, will your Committee on Agricultural Affairs report that we have had under consideration House Bills 96 and 97 and recommend that they do pass. Andrus, Chairman.
House Bill 96 and 97 will be filed for second reading. Without objection, the House will now advance to the eighth order of business, introduction, first reading, and reference of bills and joint resolutions. The House is at the eighth order.
In the House of Representatives, House Bill number 188 by Health and Welfare Committee, an act relating to patient care records, amending Section 39-1394 Idaho Code to provide that a practitioner who is not the author of an order but who is responsible for the care of a patient may authenticate the order and to provide that each hospital may have a policy to assure timely orders by a practitioner who is not the author of the order. House Bill number 189 by Health and Welfare Committee, an act relating to hospitalization of the mentally ill, amending Section 162411 Idaho Code to provide that a minor who is suffering from a serious emotional disturbance and possesses a danger to himself or others may be temporarily detained by a health care professional without hearing, and to make technical correction, amending Section 66326 Idaho Code to provide that the health care professionals may temporarily detain a mentally ill patient in an emergency without a hearing, and amending Section 66329 to provide that certain health care professionals may commence proceedings for the involuntary care and treatment of mentally ill persons by the Department of Health and Welfare and to make a technical correction. House Bill number 190 by Health and Welfare Committee, an act relating to the Healthcare Professional Transparency Act, amending Title 48 Idaho Code by the addition of new Chapter 17, Title 48, to provide a short title, to provide legislative intent, to define terms, to provide healthcare practitioner transparency requirements, and to provide for violations and enforcements and providing an effective date. House Bill number 191 by Health and Welfare Committee, an act relating to minors, amending Chapter 15, Title 18 Idaho Code by the addition of a new Section 181524 to define terms, to provide for exceptions, to prohibit or limit the use of tanning devices by minors, to provide for exceptions, to prohibit a tanning facility from claiming that the use of a tanning device is free from risk, to provide for penalties, and to provide a scope for local governments. House Bill number 192 by State Affairs Committee, an act related to licenses to carry concealed weapons, amending Section 183302 Idaho Code to revise renewal and fee provisions for licenses to carry concealed weapons, amending Chapter 33, Title 18 by the addition of new Section 33002K Idaho Code to provide for the issuance of enhanced licenses to carry concealed weapons, to provide fees, to provide procedures, to provide duties of the Idaho State Police and the Attorney General, and to provide application, amending Section 9340B Idaho Code to provide reference to additional records that are exempt from disclosure with exceptions and providing severability. House Bill number 193 by State Affairs Committee, an act relating to prepaid wireless telecommunications service emergency communication fees, amending Section 314809 Idaho Code to provide that certain fees shall be deposited into designated emergency communication funds, amending Section 314813 to define terms to provide for the imposition of prepaid wireless E911 fees, to provide for the collection of fees, the disclosure of fees, to clarify those retail transactions treated as occurring in the state of Idaho, to specify consumer and seller liability, to provide that fees shall not be included in the base for measuring any charges imposed by the state, political subdivision of the state, or intergovernmental agency, to provide for the increase or reduction of fees, the application of the imposed percentage by the seller, the remittance of fees to the Idaho State Tax Commission, to provide that the Idaho State Tax Commission shall establish certain procedures, to provide for seller retention of a percentage of fees, to provide for retention of a percentage of fees by the Idaho State Tax Commission, to restrict or certain liability, to provide for the applicability of the specified liability provisions, and to prohibit the imposition of additional E911 funding obligations, and amending Section 314818 Idaho Code to provide that the Idaho Emergency Communications Fund shall include monies from specified fees, and to provide for the distribution of certain funds and providing an effective date.
House Bills 188, 189, 190, 191, and 192, and as well as House Bill 193 will be referred to Judiciary Rules and Administration for printing. The House will now advance to the ninth order of business, first reading of engrossed bills. The House is at the ninth order.
In the House of Representatives, House Bill number 12, as amended in the Senate by Revenue and Taxation Committee, regarding sales and use tax.
House Bill number 12, as amended in the Senate, will be filed for second reading. Without objection, the House will now advance to the 10th order of business, second reading of bills and joint resolutions. The House is at the 10th order.
In the House of Representatives, Senate Bill 1076 by Finance Committee regarding appropriations, Hispanic Affairs Commission. Senate Bill 1077 by Finance Committee regarding appropriations, blind and visually impaired.
Senate Bill 1076 and 1077 will be filed for third reading. The House will now advance to the 11th order of business, third reading of bills and joint resolutions. The House is at the 11th order. The House will have under consideration House Bill 65. The gentleman from District 14.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Request unanimous consent that we dispense with further reading of House Bill 65.
You've all heard the unanimous consent request. Is there an objection? Hearing none, the good gentleman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good men and women of this body, I bring before you an important bill today having to do with our education system. As a result of the repeal of Students Come First legislation, there was a significant cut to our education funding for our school districts. I've heard it said, and I believe it's probably true, that this cut was the second largest cut to our education system to ever be enacted in our state. There are some that would argue that the voters have spoken, therefore we should do nothing to help our districts. However, I don't subscribe to that philosophy. There are others that would argue that the voters did not know what they were doing when they enacted this cut. I would suggest that it's impossible to define what the voters meant, primarily because we don't ask them to explain their vote. And because the reasons for voting, the way they did, span an entire spectrum, that discussion then quickly degenerates into claim and counterclaim of stories and speculation. The bottom line is, we don't know. Let me tell you what we do know, though. We do know that each one of us in this body, as well as the body across the rotunda, were elected to try to improve our state, and by extension to improve our education system. And I bring to you this day legislation which I believe does just that. I believe that all of us have every right, in fact, we have an obligation to consider this type of legislation. Let me explain exactly what is behind this legislation. At this time of year, last year, every school district in our state was setting their budget. They were setting their budget based on the laws that were in place at that point in time. When the repeal happened, Those expectations, I mean, the budgets were set on, were then changed. Unfortunately, they had already set the budget. They had hired teachers. They had made contracts, which I believe that they should continue to meet those obligations. But in order to do so, we need to pass this legislation. If you will turn with me to the statement of purpose in the fiscal note, I think that's probably the easiest way to go through this legislation to understand where that funding is going. If you're looking at the fiscal note, you'll see the top line, pay for performance, $38 million. Well, let me first describe the three columns, and maybe even back up a little bit further. What we're talking about, these are funds for fiscal year 13. In other words, the year we are in, the year that will end June 30th. So the first column is what was originally budgeted. That column is the expectation that was set, all right? The second column is the ramifications of the repeal, and then the third column is the proposed fix. Really, all we're doing is just meeting the expectations that were set. The first item, number one, pay for performance, $38 million. This is money that has already gone out. Why is it here? I think it's important for you to see what has happened. The reason it's already gone out is because the Attorney General ruled that that money had already been earned and therefore should be distributed. Next is number two, technology and professional development. $13 million, 4.9, nearly $5 million had already been spent. And then the fix is a different number. Why is that? Okay, first of all, let me tell you what technology and professional development actually means. It's a number of different areas. This includes classroom technology. This is everything from your smart boards to your clickers to potentially getting some iPads in a classroom, things like that. This is really being driven at the local level and based on their desires and needs. Technology also means what's called a wireless gap study, okay? This is a study that needs to be done in our buildings to determine where there's gaps in wireless coverage. Where do they need to put a repeater, things like that. It also includes the development of an online course portal. This is an online tool for our parents and students to get on and find out what courses are available in Idaho by Idaho instructors that are being taught online with a rating system. So our parents can look and say, hey, this is a 5-star class, this looks like a good class that my student would do well in. The last area has to do with professional development. So professional development spans quite a spectrum, but some of our immediate needs have to do with what is called Common Core. This is a curriculum that's being rolled out across our state that actually the concept originated in our state, but is now spread to a number of other states. But our teachers need to really get a firm foundation on it. It also includes a professional development on something called SchoolNet as well. SchoolNet is a resource of information and almost a database of tools for the teacher to use in the classroom for teaching. So that's what when we talk about that line, technology and professional development, that is what that is. Why is the number higher? What we have done is we've taken the $2.5 million from the mobile computing devices and brought that up there as well, because we've seen a real need, particularly with Common Core, in order to be successful with the rollout of that. Next, we have dual credit, line number 3. This is for our early completers. These are for our kids that are done with everything, all of their graduation requirements by their senior year. However, except for their senior project and their senior math class. This provides them an opportunity to start taking college-level classes in our high schools today. That's what that number is for. I've already explained number 4. Let's go to math and science teachers. As all of you certainly know, we have a challenge in the United States with what is called STEM. STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and math. Some real deficiencies there. One of the issues is trying to get teachers in the classroom. And this was to money that was sent out to our districts to hire these teachers. Again, this is an example where contracts have been placed, teachers have been hired. We set that expectation. We need to meet that expectation. Use it or lose it flexibility. What we have done over the last several years on the request of school districts, as we all know, we've had some significant financial challenges. The districts came to us and said, you allocate us money based on the number of kids that come to us and tell us that we have to hire X number of teachers. If you'll give us a little bit of flexibility on that hiring of teachers, that we could spend that money however we want, then that would help us meet some of the short-term financial challenges. And we've agreed to do that. And so we've said 9.5% of the funding that we give you, we're going to give you flexibility on. Well, that flexibility was part of the laws originally. When the laws were repealed, that flexibility went away, and all of a sudden they're finding themselves in a $24.5 million hole. We need to restore that flexibility back to them. Next, one of the other things we did was the way we pay our teachers today are based on basically two factors. One is their experience, and the second is their educational qualifications. And it's a grid, and the teachers move along this grid to determine their pay and how we fund. That grid had been unfrozen, and then with the repeal, it was refrozen. In other words, they couldn't move along, and all of a sudden, our district says, "Oh, we already moved those teachers along the grid. We're paying them as if they've moved along that grid." Well, that's worth $4 million to our districts. The eighth point here has to do with what is called the fifth factor. Let's not get hung up on the name. What the principle is here is that there was a mechanism used to fund students come first, and that was to reallocate that money, and that was worth $14 million. Well, this is not money that school districts were expecting at all. Wasn't an expectation was set, and so in terms of meeting our obligations, we're saying, look, that wasn't an expectation, that $14 million, and so we're not going to give you that because you didn't expect that. The last has to do with national board certification, and really this is something that, as you can see, wasn't in the original proposal. It came back with the repeal, and we're continuing on because there is some value in national board certification. And as a result, that 111 came. So I don't intend to go through the specific legislation unless there's questions on it, because I hope that this gives you a good sense of where the money is going, and more importantly, the why. Why is this important that we provide this back to our school districts today? And with that, I open the floor for debate, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Is there further debate? Hearing none, the debate is closed. The question is, shall House Bill 65 pass the House? The clerk will unlock the machine and the members will cast their votes. Has every member voted? Representative McMillan. Does any member wish to change his vote? The clerk will lock the machine and record the roll. The roll call shows 69 aye, 0 nay, 1 absent and excused. House Bill 65 has passed the House. Is there a correction to title? Hearing none, House Bill 65 will be transmitted to the Senate. The House will now have under consideration House Bill 180. Good lady from District 6.
Mr. Speaker, I request unanimous consent to dispense with further reading of House Bill 180.
You've heard the unanimous consent request. Is there an objection? Hearing none, the good lady is recognized. Open debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is the fiscal year 2013 supplemental for the Division of Welfare in the Department of Health and Welfare. And so this is not considering the 2014 budget. It includes 2 items for the division, as well as legislative intent language pertaining to one of the enhancements. The first line item is called Medicaid Readiness, and these are the 2 items that I have are actually somewhat complicated, so it'll take just a moment. Let me talk about it for a bit. This project, called Medicaid Readiness, includes the pre-implementation activities necessary to prepare for changes to the Medicaid program under the Affordable Care Act. This project is only for the mandatory changes under the law, as opposed to optional expansion. The increase is for $6,320,000 in federal funds. The purpose is to reprogram the rules engine for the Idaho Benefits Eligibility System, called IBES, which is used to process Medicaid applications and screen for eligibility. The Affordable Care Act requires all states to use a standard eligibility methodology called Modified Adjusted Gross Income, or MAGI. You may have heard that term. MAGI is a major departure from the methodology currently in place, and therefore a full reprogramming is required in order to calculate eligibility as required by the law starting in 2014. Medicaid Readiness is a 3-year project spanning fiscal years 2012 through 2014. The full amount of the project is one-time and matched at a 90% federal share, and that is that the state pays the remaining 10%. For budgeting purposes, the full increase tracks as federal due to the source of the state's share. The department plans to use $632,000 of federal food stamp performance bonus payments for the non-federal contribution. Some of you may know that as SNAP. Although the performance bonus money tracks as federal, as reflected in on the SOP, states are granted flexibility in the use of these funds, allowing states to use performance bonus payments as non-federal match or for other purposes. And there is a legislative intent section included in this appropriation. Section 2 of the bill clarifies that Medicaid Readiness funding is intended to support only the mandatory changes to the Medicaid program under the Affordable Care Act. It recognizes the fact that the state's decision relating to the optional Medicaid expansion is an entirely separate discussion and will be handled accordingly. That was the first section, the first line item, and the second is called Grocery Tax Credit Donations. This item is for $831,900 of dedicated fund spending authority to spend grocery tax credit donations provided by Idaho taxpayers on their income tax returns. The statute allows the donation specifically, and it specifically stipulates that the state will use donated funds to help low-income Idahoans pay home energy costs, and that is 63-3024A12. The funding consists of $605,200 one time and $226,700 ongoing. I realize it sounds complicated. It's actually a long project that's winding down, and I request your yes vote on House Bill 180.
Is there further debate? The gentleman from District 24.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the good lady yield to a question?
Will the lady from District 6 yield to a question?
Mr. Speaker, the lady yields.
The lady yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm looking at the Section 2 as referred to on lines 29 and then again on 31. I see 2 key words here are enclosed in quotation marks as if they were not really meant to say what they actually say. That's way sometimes that quotation marks are used. Could the good lady explain why the terms mandatory and optional are included in quotation marks, and what is the meaning of the existence of that? Does that mean that those words have a different meaning in the context of the statute? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Lady from 6.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm not sure if you needed to, the good gentleman from 24, whether it was the idea of the quotation marks or the meaning of the word, but let me speak to it a little, and then if it doesn't satisfy your request, well, we can delve into it. there are two parts to the Medicaid readiness preparation, and one part is totally mandated as far as the Affordable Care Act, and it's been in progress, and that's called the mandatory portion. And then the second part that has been the subject of much discussion is called the optional expansion of Medicaid. And that has not been vetted by a committee or by the bodies, and therefore is using the legislative intent language is not included in this funding.
Will the
Gentleman from District
thank you,
24.
Mr. Speaker. Will the lady yield to an additional clarification?
Will the lady yield?
The lady yields.
The lady yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good lady, specifically on line 31, the word optional, does this in any way take away from the state's ability to consider and deal with the expansion of Medicaid readiness in the future? If the word means that it's optional and we take it away, or if it means something else, are we giving up a power that we may want to exercise at some future date?
Lady from 6.
Mr. Speaker, the gentleman from 24, it's called optional in that at this time for this appropriation and this part of the act, it is not required, it's not mandated, but it is something that some states and legislatures may wish to discuss. But we have not done that yet in Idaho.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, good lady.
Is there further debate?
Mr. Speaker.
Yes, good lady from District 33.
And I apologize, I can't see what district.
She is from District 6.
Would the good lady from District 6 yield to a
Will the
question?
good lady from District 6?
Mr. Speaker, the lady yields.
The lady yields.
I'm just curious, why did we combine these two funds and not bring them forward separately?
Lady from 6.
Mr. Speaker, and I need to understand what two funds,
Would
if
the
you
lady
mean
from
the
District
gross...
33 clarify her question, please?
Yes. I am curious as to why we have the MAGI funding and then the funding separate or combined for the tax credit or the grocery or
Good lady from District 6, and there seems to be some help in the wings should you decide to yield. So,
Mr.
from
Speaker,
6.
and the good lady from 33, there are two line items, and they're actually separate appropriations, and so it may be, I'm thinking that perhaps you're thinking that it's the grocery tax credit is part of the first line item, but they're completely separate.
Would the lady from District 25 yield to that question?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and the lady from 6 has done a beautiful job. Good lady, this is the department, this is the Division of Welfare, and it just happens that the equipment, the IBIS, that has been mandated to be restructured is in the Department of Welfare. And also that money that those of you who are good enough to do the checkoff on your tax money happen to be resting there waiting to go out and help people heat their homes. So that's the way we run budgets, by division.
Is there further debate? The gentleman from District 23.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the good lady from 6 yield?
Will the lady yield?
Mr. Speaker, the good lady yields.
Lady yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good lady from 6. If we were not to pass this bill, is there some time in the future where we could address this mandatory section, and how long do we have to do it?
Lady from 6.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good gentleman from 23. The mandatory part has already been mandated, and we're 2/3 of the way through that project. And it no matter what we do in the future, we need to complete that part, and that's what the supplemental appropriation is meant to cover. And I believe that needs to be ready 2014, January 2014. And then the expanded optional portion does not have a time limit at this time, at this moment.
The gentleman from 23 would like to debate the bill.
The gentleman has the floor to debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Fellow colleagues, this presents to me a particular dilemma. We are presented with a budget item that, as my feel is, that we don't have to do that right now. The federal government's not going to be ready to do their share on this thing by 2014. We don't know. This is mandatory, yes, but is it mandatory that we have to do it? And if we don't do it, then our chance of not having Medicaid expansion would be better. If we do it, we're opening the door for Medicaid expansion, which can be a dangerous element in this state, because if you look nationwide, the states that are in big trouble, it's because of Medicaid expansion and the things that they're doing with Medicaid. And I really fear for Idaho financially to go down this road. I see no reason to take this up right now when we haven't addressed many of the other big issues in this thing. This is a tiny step forward, and it weakens our resolve probably on some of the other issues in the Affordable Care Act. Thank you.
Is there further debate? Good lady from District 8.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In opposition to this appropriation, as I listened to the presentation, I thought it became very clear to me that this is, as the preceding gentleman said, one of those little baby steps toward, I guess I'll be gracious and call it the Affordable Care Act, although I think affordable is a misnomer. But at any rate,
graciousness is always appreciated.
But at any rate, I do agree with the gentleman that just preceded me. However, we have not, unless something happened last night while I was asleep, actually taken a bite of that Affordable Care Act apple yet. That is still to come, and until it comes, I don't accept it. And I guess I am a little concerned that the federal government may be the only entity on the planet that thinks the cart is supposed to pull the horse. And I don't prefer to give them a leg up. Thank you.
Is there further debate? The lady from District 25.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, there are many like-minded people in here who feel uncomfortable and feel the same way. But we have agencies who have to abide by the law. And it is the law. And beginning down this road a year ago, when we started to put the system in place, the system was not a throwaway. It could have been used without the Affordable Care Act, that first part of it. Then the Supreme Court came along and left us no doubt that we had the Affordable Care Act. So phase 2 then came forth, and at that time the department went to the AG and said, what can we do here? And the AG's opinion was, you can do nothing but do what you need to do to put that system in place. So that basically we're conforming to a law right now, and since that ruling, they're doing the best they can with their charge as an agency of the state of Idaho. I'm troubled also, but I feel it's our responsibility to leave our agencies with the systems that by law they have to have, and to leave them within place that they can take care of business, so to speak. Just business as usual at this point. We do not, as the good lady said, she was so careful to make sure her language said, this in no way puts policy in place for an expansion. This is just simply the second phase of a Medicaid readiness system that must be in place in this state. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there further debate? The gentleman from District 15. 15 first.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would
Had you by a nose.
would the good lady from District 6 yield to a question?
Will the good lady from District 6 yield to a question?
The lady from 6 yields.
Lady yields.
Thank you. And this may be a long question, but
As long as it's not debate.
it's my understanding that the MAGI system, the modified adjusted gross income, does a couple of things. Number one, it changes the eligibility criteria for what you count. You add in or you subtract in determining the level of the poverty level that qualifies for Medicaid. And the other thing it does is it takes away our asset limitations. And in doing so, that actually does cause an increase in the number of eligible applicants, which I think is called the surge, which is about 27,000 individuals. Was that discussed in the committee at all in looking at whether this appropriation should be approved or not?
Lady from 6. I think there's nexus there, but if you can connect the dots for us, that would be great.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative from District 15. The rules are, the eligibility rules, as you describe in the MAGI, are different, and it does anticipate a certain number of persons who have been euphemistically called the woodwork effect, in that they are people who are eligible now but have not come forward. And those people have been included in the computations of the division and the department.
One more follow-up, Mr. Speaker.
Would the good lady yield to a further question?
The lady yields.
Lady yields.
Thank you, Mr.
Let's
Speaker.
have it a little more on point this time.
Madam, from 16 or 6, this is a supplemental appropriation, and the good lady from 25 mentioned some guidance from the Attorney General's office, but can you tell us who actually authorized the expenditure of these funds that we're now asking to be provide a supplemental authority
Lady
for?
from 6.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I would defer to the good lady from 25, as I was not here when the original amounts were appropriated.
Would the lady from District 25 yield to that question? From
Mr.
the good
Speaker,
gentleman from 15?
I would be happy to yield. Good gentleman, I would assume it was this body who authorized these funds to begin with, because the first part of this system was put in place last year.
Is there further debate?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to debate against this bill. I realize this is probably a fait accompli. The money's already in the process. However, when the Supreme Court came down with its decision, it wasn't a broad-ranging decision of upholding the entire act. What the issues were confined to were narrow, and one was the personal mandate. And the Supreme Court upheld the personal mandate based on tax authority of the federal government. It rejected the Medicaid expansion as a requirement, indicating that the Commerce Clause did not reach that far, and it gave the states the option on the Medicaid expansion. The MAGI is something that's kind of in between, because it's come to us in the form of a mandate to change the eligibility requirements that we've used for these many years. And it does a couple of things, as I mentioned. Number one, it changes what you include in the income or what you take out of the income. Basically, it dumbs it down a little bit so that it's a cleaner calculation. It's based on some IRS formulas. Secondly, it does a very important thing, which I think is significant, and it takes away all of the asset requirements. Right now, we have two eligibility requirements. One is income, one is assets. those asset requirements go away under MAGI. That has come to us as a mandate, but that was not addressed in the Supreme Court decision. And in fact, it actually ends up being an expansion of Medicaid. There are a couple of different expansions of Medicaid. One is the Woodwork effect. That is those extra people who are already required to be on Medicaid or are eligible for Medicaid, but for one reason or another have not chosen to be on Medicaid. But when they go into the exchange portal, everybody's going to be screened, and so you're going to have a natural increase of people who are going to apply for Medicaid, even though they had not actually applied for it, they were eligible. Those folks are now going to apply, and that is an increase even under our current eligibility standards. There's another group which is called the Surge, and that has to do with the MAGI change. And that's somewhere between 24 and 35,000 people, depending on which numbers you look at. So this is not a simple clean up the computer bill. This is effecting policy that the federal government has mandated upon this state. Now, to what extent, we have a voice in it because, as it appears, it's somewhat a fait accompli. This is the time to send a message if you want to send a message, and so I'm going to vote no on this.
Is there further debate? The gentleman from District 32.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I hate to debate in favor of this bill because, as all of you know, I have resisted my entire time in the legislature any expansions of Medicaid. But I think what you have to realize here that this is not the expansion piece. And I think it needs to be absolutely clear to the body that is not what we're doing here. These are changes that are being brought to us, compliments of the revisions to the Medicaid program nationally. It's unpalatable as it can be because we are going to experience other events that we haven't even begun to talk about with regard to how that affects our catastrophic fund and the county's indigent programs. We're going to have a whole new group of people who will fall through the cracks, if you will, that we will be mandated to take care of because they won't necessarily qualify for Medicaid any longer under what we're talking about here today. This is I'm going to be careful in the choosing of my words here, but this is very difficult pill for me to swallow. But is one of those things that we have to do in order for us to keep going down the road of Medicaid at all. Has nothing to do with expansion, but eventually we're going to be talking about that in a more fervent way as we proceed down the road.
Is there further debate? The gentleman from District 28.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the good lady from 25 yield to a question?
Will the lady yield?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would be happy to.
The lady yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good lady. If we don't appropriate this money, it seems that we are in violation of the law. Could you tell me what the consequence and penalty would be? Is it as referenced from the good gentleman from 32 that there would be some people who would be deprived of Medicaid provisions? Is that the only penalty?
Lady from 25.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good gentleman, I have not heard of any other penalty. There would be no jail time for this body. We would leave the Department of Health and Welfare in a position, I would assume that there would be fines, but I'm going to have to get back to you on that unless the good gentleman from 27, the chairman of that committee, should know. I do not know. I guess we always assume that we'll do the right thing and gulp no matter what, so I didn't look into the penalty part. Good gentleman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good lady.
Is there further debate?
Mr. Speaker,
The gentleman from District 10.
In response to the gentleman's question, I apologize, I didn't hear all of the debate from the good lady. What would happen if you do not pass this legislation, do this, then the department becomes in non-compliance, and that does affect then the federal match rate that we would be eligible for Medicaid.
Is there further debate? For what purpose does the good lady rise?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, to debate for the second time.
Does anyone wish to debate the bill for the first time? See none, the good lady has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Listening to the back and forth and the gulp before we swallow, I'm reminded, although I do not agree with Chief Justice Roberts' entire ruling on the constitutional issue of the Affordable Health Care Act, he did make a very important point on sovereignty, reminded us that we are sovereign states, that we have power, and that we needed to act like it. I still see this as a step, a gulp and a swallow, if you will, toward the Affordable Care Act's complete and total acceptance. I don't care if you guys think it's the law. I suppose it is up to a point, although as a tax it was passed incorrectly because it did not start in the House, and they have the same constitutional rules that we do. I consider the whole thing unconstitutional, and that we don't have to abide by it as a sovereign state if we don't want to. Throw the ball into their court.
Is there further debate for the second time? The gentleman from District 23.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I find this really difficult for me to do at this time, but this is one time I will take exception with the gentleman from, well, he's on the corner over there, 32. And that's this. It's true that if we don't accept this idea and the expansion of Medicaid, a lot of this expense is going to go to the catastrophic funds in the county, and when the county's exhausted in that arena, it'll go to the state. And we're going to pay an awful lot of money either way. But I'm simply suggesting to you, when do we finally say no and start to reverse the activities? As the good lady stated from District 8, and I have a copy of that statement, this is one of those times when I feel that we need to start acting like that sovereign state that we are and say no, thank you, in definite terms. Thank you.
Is there further debate for the second time? Hearing none, would the good lady from District 6 care to close the debate?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to let the body know that many of us on the JFAC committee spent a great deal of time studying this issue and studying the law and what options were available. And the discussion that's been taking place here very much mirrored the discussions that we had in our small groups. And that was why eventually we came to the conclusion that the wording of the legislative intent language was so important that we were hoping that that would reassure this body and that we had done the best we could given the constraints of the law and the requirements. And I request that you consider this and vote yes on House Bill 180.
Thank you, good lady. The debate is closed. The question is, shall House Bill 180 pass the House? The clerk will unlock the machines and the members will cast their votes. Has every member voted? Representative Holtzclaw, Representative Morse. Does any member wish to change his vote? The clerk will lock the machine and record the roll. The roll call shows 48 aye, 21 nay, 1 absent and excused. House Bill 180 has passed the House. Is there correction to title? Hearing none, House Bill 180 will be transmitted to the Senate. The gentleman from District 14.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to the remaining bills on the third reading calendar hold their place one legislative day.
You've all heard the unanimous consent request. Is there an objection? Hearing none, the remaining bills on the third reading calendar will hold their place for one legislative day. Without objection, the House will now advance to the 15th order of business, announcements. Are there announcements? The gentleman from District 12.
Mr. Speaker, point of personal privilege.
The gentleman has the floor.
Mr. Speaker and members of the House, please welcome my daughter's best friend, Angela Bartlow, her professor and master's class from BSU.
Welcome to the House gallery. Are there further announcements?
One more introduction, please, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman still has the floor.
I would also like to introduce my boss, who has graciously supported my service here, Mr. Daryl Gustavson from Syringa Bank.
Are there further announcements? The gentleman from District 1.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the body, I've been asked to remind you of Forestry Day luncheon, Forestry Day at the legislature, at 12 o'clock at the Boise Center Convention Center. And part of the presentation there will be information on the state's budget for fire suppression and our wildfires that we experienced this summer. Thank you.
The lady from District 26.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The minority will be holding a caucus meeting at noon today.
Are there further announcements? Clerk may read.
Following are the Standing Committee meeting announcements for this afternoon. Business Committee will meet this afternoon at 1:30, East Wing, Room 41, Henderson Chairman. Commerce and Human Resources Committee will meet this afternoon at 1:30, East Wing, Room 5, Hartgen Chairman. Judiciary Rules and Administration Committee will meet this afternoon at 1:30, East Wing, Room 42, Wills Chairman. Resources and Conservation Committee will meet this afternoon at 1:30, East Wing, Room 40, Denny Chairman. For tomorrow morning, Education Committee will not meet on Wednesday, February 20th, DeMordaunt Chairman. Health and Welfare Committee will not meet Wednesday, February 20th, Wood Chairman. Revenue and Taxation Committee will meet tomorrow morning, Wednesday, February 20th at 9 a.m., East Wing, Room 42, Collins Chairman. And State Affairs Committee will meet tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., East Wing, Room 40, Lurcher Chairman.
The House will now advance to the 16th order of business, adjournment. The House is at the 16th order. Good gentleman from District 14.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House do now adjourn until the hour of 11 a.m. Wednesday, February 20th, 2013.
Mr. Speaker, I second the motion.
You've all heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The motion carries, and the House will stand adjourned until the hour of 11 a.m. Wednesday, February 20th, 2013.